Hi, I'm Stacy Williams-Duncan with Learning Forte Consulting. With all the changes to Zoom this week, understanding your settings in Zoom has become even more important. So I have created this video to walk you through all of the different settings that you can establish in your Zoom account. If you have Zoom downloaded onto your computer, you can start by launching the app. And from there, you will find your settings over here at this little wheel. And you click Settings. And once your settings window is open, you will see lots of different categories of settings alongside here and the settings here. We're going to start with the general settings. If you are someone who likes to use dual monitors to have Zoom open on one computer so that you can have other documents open on the other, you need to make sure that you activate dual monitors. Enter full screen when sharing or joining a meeting means that the whole entire screen of your monitor will be taken up with Zoom. If you want to automatically copy the invitation URL once the meeting starts, you can click this. One of the settings that I often choose is to ask me to confirm when I'm leaving a meeting. I like that. It's up to you if you like that or not. You can choose whether you want to see the meeting duration. You can choose whether you want to add the Zoom to the Mac iOS menu bar or to your PC menu bar. You can think about whether you want to stop audio and video if your display is off or if your screensaver begins. I don't choose that because sometimes I am presenting away from my computer for longer courses and I don't want that to stop right away. And then you also can choose if you're going to have a reminder. You also can choose the themes. There's a light, a dark, or a use the system setting, and you can choose the skin tone of your reaction icon. Now, this is where it's really important to look at. View more settings, and we're going to come back to that because there are some settings that are not available through the app that's downloaded onto your computer or your phone. They are only available on the Zoom website. When we select the video settings, you'll then see that you have the option of choosing the camera that you're going to use. If you have multiple cameras hooked up to your computer, there'll be multiple choices there. I would encourage you to not enable HD. It takes up a lot of extra bandwidth, and in this time when Zoom is being used by so many people is not necessary. You also can see lots of other options here. There is also this important option down at the bottom. Typically, Zoom allows you to see 25 participants in the gallery view, but if your computer has a new enough CPU, you can enable this to allow you to see 49 participants. The next set of settings has to do with audio settings. It allows you to test your speaker, test your microphone. It also, I want to show you down here, allows you to choose that if you want to, you can, and you're muted, you can press the space bar to temporarily unmute yourself. When we click into the screen sharing settings, it's helpful to see that there are lots of different ones. One of the ones I wanted to point out to you is this side-by-side mode. If you are sharing your screen or someone else's, this allows you to see what is being shared on the screen on one half of your screen, and you still see the participants on the other half of your screen. If you don't have this selected, what you'll see is just what's being shared. There are chat options. So there are lots of different detailed pieces here, and I think that there's just a few here to point out. If you are in a long Zoom meeting and you want people to know when you've stepped away, or if you're working in an environment where you keep Zoom open, this allows you to tell Zoom when to make you inactive. You also can choose whether you want the messages in order or whether you want your unread ones at the top, and you can once again, choose whether you want the latest message or unread messages. Now we'll look at the virtual background settings. The most important thing to know about the virtual background is you either have to have a green screen if you have an older computer, or you have to have a new computer. And so it'll tell you right here that you'll have a better virtual background experience if you have a green screen, but really current computers can do it without a green screen. You can also add a virtual background image by clicking right here. When we look at the recording settings, it's important to know that if you are not the host of the meeting, the settings that your host has established will override yours. So you can choose, if you're going to record locally, where those files will be saved on your computer. Another important thing to consider is that if you're trying to record in order to do a production piece and not just to record a meeting, you might want to have a separate audio file for each participant so that you can adjust the audio levels in an editor. And that is possible. Also, once again, you can optimize a recording for a third-party video editor. This increases the file size greatly. So if you're not going to edit your videos, you don't want to do that. You can choose whether you're going to add a timestamp to the recording. I encourage you to do this, especially if you're recording meetings in order to establish minutes or other things. And you can decide whether you're going to continue to record during screen sharing. So you will have so much cloud recording if you're a pro user in Zoom, and this will let you know how much of that you've used. If you click Manage, it's going to take you to the Zoom website, and it's a place in which you can delete your cloud recordings so that you don't go over your limit. Profile is one of those places where we go into advanced settings, which happens on the Zoom website. Statistics allows you to see how much CPU, energy, and memory Zoom is using. It also allows you to see your audio settings, your video settings, and how much screen sharing you've done. Under keyboard shortcuts, you can see the shortcuts that are built into Zoom. And if you're going to spend a lot of time in Zoom, these are helpful to know. And finally, Zoom has an accessibility tab, and this allows you to adjust the size of the closed captioning that can happen. One of the things that I think is really helpful for accessibility is to always show meeting controls. That means that the Zoom toolbar will stay up all of the time, so you don't have to worry about it sometimes disappearing on you. If you find the chat text too small in Zoom, this is where you can increase that size. Now that we've looked at all the settings that are built into the Zoom app on your computer, we will go and look at advanced settings that are on the web page. You can access them by just clicking this View More Settings button. When you get to the web page, if you're not logged in, you will need to log in. And once you've logged in, because you came from the View More Settings button in your app, you will come right to the meeting settings page. Now, if you're someone who only uses Zoom via the web and you have come to Zoom and logged in, then you will find all of these settings by clicking on My Account. Remember in the app where we skipped over the profile section? Well, this is exactly where the profile section is. And you would go through and you would fill this out. And it allows you to put in your preferred date and time. If you're someone that wants to integrate with a calendar, this is where you would do that. We're going to spend most of our time right here in this Settings tab. And you'll see that we have settings for meetings, for recording, and for telephone. We'll start by looking at the meeting settings. Some of these are repetitive from what we did earlier in the app, so we'll go over them quickly. But we also will see that there are a lot of different ones here that were not in the app. So you can choose whether you start with a video on. Do the participants start with a video on? How are you going to allow audio to take place? Will you allow someone to join before the host? So some of you may have joined a Zoom meeting and you've received a notice that said you're waiting for the host to start that meeting. That means that this was toggled off. And whenever you change a setting in Zoom, it will tell you your settings have been updated. Whether you allow people to join before you or not is up to you. There are pros and cons both ways. You may choose whether you're going to use your personal ID when scheduling a meeting. I have to tell you, I used to always use my personal ID, but now that we've gotten more serious about security and worried about people who weren't supposed to be in meetings entering them, I've stopped using it as much. Because if you don't use your personal ID every time, it means that every meeting has a unique ID and a unique link. I do use my personal ID when I'm starting an instant meeting because I want people that work with me to be able to quickly get there. If you are using a Zoom account from a school or a bigger institution or a company, you can click this on, which would only allow those people who have Zoom accounts from that organization to join your meeting. You can choose whether you're going to require a password when you're scheduling new meetings. Now, some of you may say, I don't want to have a password on every meeting because that makes it much more difficult. In just a second, I'm going to show you how you can have a password and not make it too much more difficult. Once again, they're going to ask about passwords for instant meetings and requiring passwords for instant meetings. This next setting is the key to making password meetings not too difficult. When you turn this on, the link that you send has a password embedded in it. So it gives you the security of having a password on your meeting, but people don't have to enter it. Now, the trick to this is that people can't share this link publicly. So if you're going to share a link publicly and you want a password, then you need to give the password separately to people. You might choose to mute participants upon entry. Most of the Zoom meetings I do are smaller, and so I choose not to do that. Now we're moving into some other basic meeting settings. This first one has to do with encryption. Now, that makes a lot of sense, and I would turn it on normally, but I've actually enabled live streaming to YouTube, and so I can't turn it on because YouTube is not compatible with that. Chat. You get to choose whether your participants participate in chat and if their chats are visible to everyone or just you, or if you want them to be able to save the chat or not. Do you want participants to be able to have chats with each other, or do you only want them to be able to talk to everyone? There's options about auto-saving chats. One of the important things to think about is, do you want a ding every time someone enters and leaves a meeting? I choose not to do that because I find it distracting, but other people really like to know when people enter and leave meetings. The next few things are about feedback to Zoom, and you will have to make that decision for yourself. Now we get to an important one. You want to be able to add co-host, especially if you're doing a larger meeting or you're leading chapel or worship or you're leading a class, because a co-host can help you manage all of the participants in the chat. And if this is not enabled, then you don't have the ability to add a co-host. Polling is a tool that Zoom has that lots of people don't use. You have the ability to survey basically your participants, and they can see the responses, or you can make it so they don't see the responses. Always show the meeting toolbar. That was one of the things we talked about in the accessibility tab in the app. I think it's a great idea. Once again, another one that we talked about during screen sharing was to show the Zoom windows. You have choices about screen sharing here. And you can disable it for different users. Annotation is a tool you may not know about. This allows participants to actually annotate documents or images that are on the screen share via Zoom or on the whiteboard. Zoom also has a whiteboard that you can activate. Remote control. If you activate remote control, then you actually can ask someone to give you permission to move around what is happening on their computer. This is often used for people that are doing tutoring or tech help. You can remove participants and you get to choose whether you allow them to rejoin or not. You also get to choose whether participants can rename themselves. Breakout rooms are places in which in Zoom you can go and have small group conversations. You choose whether to have those or not. A virtual background. You can choose whether your participants can have a virtual background or not. I want to talk just a second about the waiting room. The waiting room, as we mentioned earlier, is where a participant wouldn't automatically come into a Zoom meeting. Instead, they receive a notice and a sign on their computer that says that they are in the waiting room, and the host will admit them when they want to. So this can be very helpful for interviews. This next setting about live streaming is really important because you will not be able to live stream if you have not activated it here. Next, we get to email notifications and when you might want to receive a notification. You can also give people scheduling privileges, but the trick here is that you have to be part of the same Zoom account. So if you're using a school account, you can give other people with that same EDU address who have the same Zoom account to scheduling privileges. But I can't just give anyone with a Zoom account scheduling privileges. That was a long walk through the detailed settings under meetings in Zoom, and it won't take near as long to look at recording and at telephone. So recording, will you allow participants to locally record on their computer, or are you not going to allow them? Are you going to allow recording to the cloud, which means that it would go into your Zoom storage on your Zoom account or not? And if you do record to the cloud, what kind of recording are you going to get? I find that you don't need all of these. And if you click each of these, you will end up with 3 or 4 different files for one meeting. You could choose to automatically record. Unless you really need to record every meeting, I would encourage you not to do that because it can very quickly result in lots of files. The other recording setting that I want to point out to you is this recording disclaimer. If you're recording for research or another reason you need to have permission to record, use this. Many people will not need to adjust the telephone settings at all. You have the ability to decide whether you're going to show the international numbers on your invitation, whether you're going to allow toll calls. Will you allow people to use third-party tools or to mask the numbers of the participants? So most of us can really just leave the telephone settings alone for the most part. Thank you for sticking with me through that long, detailed look at all of the different settings in Zoom. Zoom has great guides for each individual tool and setting. So if you want to know more about any one setting, please go look at the Zoom help site. This is Stacey Williams-Duncan with Learning Forte Consulting, and I hope this was helpful.